I go by the name Ronky on the forums, and a number of you have expressed an interest in the progress of the new GURPS rule set. So I thought I'd take this opportunity just to do a quick demo so people can have a look and perhaps give some comments, feedback, suggestion, whatever. So let's begin. I've opened up a Fantasy Ground session here. I'm currently running as the player. In terms of the rule set, there's still some things to do on the GM side, but the player's side of things is pretty much complete. So I'll open up a character, and I'll just go through the various menus we've got here. So we've got the main character sheet, and I've taken the philosophy of adding an icon to all the things that are rollable. Let me just increase the chat window a little. So anything that is a rollable attribute or whatever will have a little icon. The same goes for modifiers. So modifiers have a little icon. These graphics or this skin is not the skin that will be released with the rule set. We have the rule set will have its own, specific GURPS skin. So yeah, anything that is rollable or clickable, draggable, or whatever will have a little icon just to make it clear. So for example, decks, I can drag, roll from an attribute, or I can double click. The same is true for these modifiers, for example. So I can double click and it will appear in the modifier stack, or I could drag it there and do the same. So this is all fairly straightforward. You've got your attributes here. You've got current attributes. These are the things that change. Your current hit points, your current fatigue, your move, and so on. And these are all editable fields. So you can change them, as your characters become wounded or whatever the case may be. We've got secondary characteristics here, which everyone should be familiar with if they're familiar with GURPS. We have our encumbrance, light through, none through to extra heavy. We've got your move and also a dodge for each of those. There is also the ability to add extra things. So I've got here jump, but we could add extra things like swim if your character has an ability to swim, or fly. Maybe you have a flight speed that your character might have. So you can add any number of extra attributes. You'll see here I've got jump, so I've got yards as opposed to movement figures. So this could be jump vertical height, so you would put feet or whatever. I'm sure everyone will find a way to make use of that. Dodge, fairly straightforward, and you've got your dodge under different encumbrances and so forth. On this secondary characteristics, you also have a reaction tab. Now this is your reaction modifiers. This is something new that's sort of been added to the rule set since the one that we've all been sort of using. You can now make a reaction roll. So if you're rolling for NPC reactions, you can make that roll, or if you need to, the GM may ask you to make a reaction roll into the dice tower, and you can just drag that there, and the GM will obviously see the that result. I've just noticed a little bug there. That will have to be fixed on release. And then you've got all these modifiers. So in doing a reaction roll, you can add modifiers prior to making the roll, and those modifiers will show here and give you a final result. That's all fairly simple. Then we will go to the Traits tab, and this is for your things like advantages and disadvantages, quirks, perks, and whatever. So I've got these couple examples here. What is new is the ability to add descriptions to any trait or notes. So I can put whatever note that might be specific to the advantage. If it's an enemy, you may want to put some details of the enemy or anything like that. So these notes can be applied to everything. Just as an example. These can also be dragged to the chat window for people to read if there's a need for it. The same applies to the disadvantages. You can apply those notes there as well. On the Abilities tab, we have 4 sections here: Skills, Spells, Powers, and Other. And these all work in a familiar fashion. So again, you've got an icon here to roll directly. You can also drag, double click, and again you've got the little icon that indicates that that is a rollable attribute. With the skills, we have again notes. You can apply notes to all your respective skills, and we also have a new thing here where you can add modifiers to individual skills. So for example, here I've added some modifier -2. There's plenty of skills in GURPS that have different modifiers for different situations, which you may want to note those modifiers on the character sheet, so you don't need to keep referencing the books or anything like that. And again, these are just click and it adds to the stack. You can of course drag it or double click, and all these modifiers are added. And when you make the roll, those modifiers will show up here and give you a success or failure result. Going on to spells. Spells is similar to the skills. Again, you've got these clickable and draggable areas. You have the modifiers options for spells, and each individual spell can have its own set of modifiers. You also have this new section here, which is a drop down that opens up extra information for that spell, so your time to cast, duration, and so on. All useful information to have on hand. Moving on to powers. Like all the other skills and spells, powers works the same. So you can have powers, add a note to your power if there's any modifiers that relate to that power, and it's again rollable because of the little icon there. And then the other tab. Now this is a sort of catch-all for roles that you may wish to set up that don't fall into the category of skills, spells, powers, and so forth. And I've set up a few examples here, such as an enemy. So if my character has an enemy or a patron or anything like that, and it shows up on a 9 or less, I can set up a roll for that and roll off the sheet here. Misfortunes of War. This is a roll that some may be familiar with if you're doing mass combat. And then a self-control roll for overconfidence. There's all number of uses that you could find for this other section. I'm sure players will find that very handy. Alright, we're moving on to the combat tab. And this is broken up into 3 sections: melee, ranged, and protection. Plus you have these attributes here. So for example, your current hit points, your fatigue, move, dodge, parry, block, and again these are rollable because of the little icon. And then let's have a look at this melee combat section. Here you can list all your different melee weapons, be they the weapons or unarmed combat or whatever. They can all be listed here, and you can add any number of them, like so. I've got this force pattern set up here, and it has the same notes, so you can apply a note to all your stuff. Again, the modifiers, so you can set up specific modifiers for the particular weapon. I've got just a few here as an example, and then you also have this drop down for the different modes of attack. So swing, for example, you got your level, the damage, and these are all, when you make when you do a damage roll, you get a calculated total there as well. Your modifiers can add to the modifier stack for when you roll. Not that all-out attack strong should have been added to a melee attack. It's a damage modifier, but you can put whatever modifiers you need to in here. And you can have any number of modes of attack. So, for example, if this was a sword, you may have a thrust component, which has its own damage type. Like so, and you can set any number of different attack modes. If this was unarmed combat, you may want to set up attack modes for leg sweeps, elbow strikes, whatever. There's all sorts of stuff, and I'm sure people will find a use for that. And like I mentioned, you have modifiers for the specific weapons that you can set up. Let's have a look at the ranged tab. Same sort of deal. You have your modifiers that you can open up, and you've also got the additional drop down for different modes of attack. You could set modes of attack, could be different ammunition. If it's a crossbow, for example, you may have armor piercing points or whatever. So you can set up any number of modes of attack. One of the members of our group used it for setting up different shots. So if you're going to fire one shot, then you can make a roll as such. It'll say one shot and it'll record how many hits. 3-shot burst, again it'll show here, and give you a result, or a full burst, again showing you the number of hits. You've got modifiers here. You've got your bulk as a modifier for when doing move and attack with a ranged weapon. That acts as a negative modifier. And you've got your accuracy that you can add on your attack if you, for example, aim. The number of hits is calculated based off your recoil, as the current GURPS rule set does. And again, you've got your additional modifiers here, and you can set up any number of things. So if you're aiming for 3 turns, you would say add your accuracy modifier, and then 2 additional turns of aiming. You may have a laser sight, and you're doing an all-out attack determined to give you total modifiers there, and then you can make your attack roll. And that was quite a lethal attack. 10 hits with a rate of fire of 12. So that is your ranged combat, and each weapon has its own stats you can expand. Then we have protection, and this is just basically your armor. So you can specify your different suits of armor, or different armor types, the location that the armor is on, and its DR. And again, you've got notes, and I've added a note here that this armor is not very good versus Ewoks, for example, or a description of what the split DR is. The combat section of the character sheet will interact with the map and the combat tracker. So I've got the tracker here, and you'll see as I make a skill roll, say our TR8R is going to shoot Finn. We could just roll as such, or we could also drag and drop onto a target in the tracker or on the map. Both methods work, and you'll see it actually brings up who this attack was made against. So I attacked Finn in this case. But we'll do a full burst on Mr. Solo over there, and that's interactive with the map. Your defences are likewise interactive with the map. So if Finn, for example, made an attack on TR8R and he was going to attempt to dodge, he could simply roll a dodge as such, or he could roll a dodge at a particular target. So in this case, TR8R is dodging Finn's attack. If Han Solo attacked him as well, he would be dodging Han Solo, which is just a useful feature. All abilities are also targetable. So if for example I was going to cast this shiny armor spell, I can cast that onto a particular target, and it will show up in the chat window. Your map works pretty much as before. You can select your targets as such. At the moment, your targeting arrows only show the range. Included in that, on release, it will actually show the GURPS range modifier attached here as well, so you can see what range penalties you'll have on ranged attacks and such. The tracker will show who's targeting what in here, and this is a player tracker. This is something new to the GURPS rule set. The current rule set doesn't have the ability for players to see the tracker, and this is a fairly useful feature, including the ability for the player to actually end their own turn themselves, which will advance the tracker. The remaining tabs are inventory and notes. Inventory is fairly straightforward. On release, this will have a few more changes made to it. Not quite sure exactly what will go in, but a few suggestions have been made, and they'll likely make it in here on release. All your items, of course, have the details that you can bring up on the said items, and you've got the ability to say whether that is carried or not, and it will adjust your carried weight accordingly, which is certainly a useful feature. Notes is the final tab, and here we have an area for you to put a description for the character. You've got your point summary over here, and then you've got the ability to add special notes. So you can add any number of note to your character sheet that may be relevant to the character itself. So and then you can give details to what those character notes are, and of course these can all be dropped into the chat window and shared for people to see if they become relevant. So that is a brief rundown of the new GURPS rule set which is built on core, and takes advantage of all the fancy stuff core does. Thanks for taking the time to have a look.